appointment or funding request.
You did come up with them? Yeah.
Yeah, but no, you may not do this one. Just like that. What you said is that sales operators have forms.
Say something.
Something?
Anymore.
Okay, and we're back. Again, like I said, we just went over filling out the funding request forms. Lastly, like I said, I left off on filling out the benefit statement. The question to ask yourself is, how is this expenditure going to benefit your community? Really important. Again, you need to fill out the board vote count section. You enter all the board members' names, and you can make copies of this form and save it onto your hard drive for future use. You fill out all the votes, all the ineligibles, absent, recused, abstentions. Everything that's left is going to be yeses. The new forms will automatically calculate for you. It'll tally everything for you. So you said it. We listened to you, right? We took care of the certification, streamlined that as well. And again, if you need to have need prior approval to issue a payment, email it to EmpowerLA.funding@lacity.org. Again, upon approval, again, one of the things that we did is we incorporated the cash request into the form. So once it's approved, that amount on the funding request will be transferred into your checking account. Again, this is the board vote count form. It's similar to what you guys did before. However, this form is only going to be used for it's going to be approved. It's going to be used for the approval of the monthly expenditure report, the budget package, or the amendment to your budget package, the appointment of your funding officers, or any other non-funding items. You know, again, neighborhood council said, "Hey, look, it's great. It's a great form. Can we use it for everything else?" So again, we incorporated that little checkbox there for those other non-funding items. Again, it works the same way. You list the board members' names, the positions, and how they voted. Again, it's also going to tally your votes for you. Certification has all been streamlined as well. As I stated, it's been incorporated into the funding request form. It's going to be used, again, like I said, for the monthly expenditure report. It will record all the votes. Again, one area where the neighborhood council, where council members will trip up is on the recusal. If they're recusing themselves, they physically have to recuse themselves before the discussion of the agenda item comes up. Okay. They have to state on record that they're recusing themselves, and they have to state for the record that they are leaving the group. Okay. Very important. And again, the treasurer is responsible for submitting the completed board vote form with the monthly expenditure report. Also, for neighborhood councils that have more than 20 members, on the back side of this form, there's an additional space for those other board members. Again, it'll tally those and include it into the resolution. And again, the board vote form does replace the resolutions or the meeting minutes that, again, the neighborhood councils used to previously submit with. Comma, however, there's always a comma, however. If the department needs, we may ask you for minutes, just to verify the recusals. Again, filling out the form, you enter the neighborhood council name, the meeting information, the basic information, the funding type, was it the monthly expenditure report, the budget, funding officer, or none of the non-funding items. You enter all the board members' names, fill in the votes, it's going to calculate it, the certification, and it's signed by the authorized signers. Now, who's the authorized signers for the board vote forms?
Treasurer and secretary.
Thank you. It's not the president, it's the treasurer and secretary. You'd be surprised. Cash request form. Yeah, this form is still around because, again, just because we've incorporated the cash request into the funding request, and even on the MPG, there may be a time when the neighborhood council is going to require additional monies for other operating expenses. You still submit this form. Again, this is one of the easiest, I keep saying this all the time, it's the easiest form the neighborhood council will have to fill out. No formal board action, just fill out the information, submit it, and once it's approved, transfer. Again, as I stated, back on July 1st, the neighborhood council checking accounts were established with $4,000. One thing to remember, and this is reflected on the cash request form, Union Bank requires the checking accounts maintain a minimum of $1,000. You drop below that $1,000, you will incur monthly service fee. I think it's $3. The department will automatically replenish your checking account back to $4,000 each month, at the beginning of each month. Again, provided that the funds are available in your budget. The treasurer, again, like I said, will complete the form along with the second signer, submit it to the department at any time during the month for additional funds. Again, anytime. The request has to be based on the approved budget, of course. And again, once the department receives the form, reviews it, approves it, we submit it to the bank. Total processing is 3 to 5 days. Okay, so again, and that's even with the funding request form. You've got to allow 3 to 5 days for that money to be into your account. If you give us a funding request on Wednesday for something that's going to happen on Friday, and you need the money, it's not going to happen because again, Union Bank requires 3 to 5 days. So again, we will work with you to get it done as fast as we can, but again, we're asking you to work with us too on the time. We have put together a pre-approval checklist, and again, I believe you do have a copy in your packets here. And again, for any vendor that you're going to be paying over $2,500, again, these are all the expenditures that have to be department approved. You want to submit the funding request form, and along with the 2 signatures, the MPGs for 501c3. You want to.
Oops, sorry.
You want to make sure you submit the funding request form, the MPG application, the IRS determination letter. Basically states they're bona fide 501c3. It doesn't state it on here, but you will need it for your monthly expenditure report. Is you want to collect a W-9 up front. Because believe me, once you give somebody some money and try to get anything from them afterwards, good luck. So it's better to collect a W-9 up front because it is required with your AR. Okay? The MPG for a public school, pretty much the same requirements. The only thing that's different is there has to be a letter on school letterhead requesting the grant. Okay? Community improvement projects, again, the funding request form. The permits, again, if you're doing an improvement project for your community, you're going to be using a contractor. They're required to pull the permits, and they're required to give you copies of what those permits are going to be. Okay? You want to make sure that they are a legitimate contractor and that they do have proper insurance in place. You want to get copies of that insurance to submit for along with your approvals. Again, God forbid you use a unlicensed contractor. The cause serious damage to city property or to the general public, guess what? It's the city, not the contractor. So you want to make sure that we're covered. Board member reimbursements, again, only for those board member reimbursements over $25. If you've got a $65 board member reimbursement, go ahead and pay it. It's only anything over $2,500. Okay? And again, the requirements are the same: copies of the receipts, proof of payment, cancel checks, or a credit card statement, bank statement, just black out all the personal information. Sponsored or co-sponsored events. Again, the event approval form, the funding request, and the itemized detailed event budget. Again, how's the NC going to spend the money on that? Neighborhood purpose group. Again, this was one of the concerns that was expressed greatly over the trainings that we did in the last quarter of 2014. It used to be, I think, 3 or 4 pages. And guess what? We streamlined it. It's only 2 pages. We took out a lot of the redundant information. We really made it nice to deal with. And again, our goal to be filling out this thing as well. Again, the neighborhood purpose grant allows the neighborhood councils to grant money to 501c3s or public schools for their annual budget. Again, anything FPG over $5,000 will require a city contract. $20,000 requires contract and approval of the Board of Commissioners, neighborhood commissioners. And again, the neighborhood council must evaluate and approve grant requests in a public hearing and make a finding of public benefit. Again, you don't want to commit funds to an organization without approval. Again, the neighborhood council has to be in good fiscal standing. What does that mean? You got to have your fiscal budget in place. You got to have your board vote on file. The monthly expenditures have to be on file and up to date. And the neighborhood council inventory reports have to be up to date. Okay. So again, just things to consider. Again, lastly, the conflict of interest laws apply. Any board member who has a relationship with a requesting school or organization must consult the Office of City Attorney or the department before that item is heard and voted on. Again, last thing you want to do is get into a conflict of interest with that neighborhood purpose grant, because what ends up happening is if it's determined that there is a conflict of interest, that organization can't request any funds for a really long time. So you don't want to do that to the nonprofit. Like I said, if there's a question. Again, neighborhood purpose grants must be submitted to the department for review and approval prior to issuing payment. You guys issue the payments, but we have to review and approve it. The treasurer will submit the following to the department: funding request form, completely filled out with 2 signatures. And what are those 2 signatures again?
Treasurer.
Because you'd be surprised. The FPG application, so completely filled out by the applicant. 2 signatures and contact information. Submitting an FPG application with 1 signature, again, it's not complete. It will be returned and delay the payment. If it's a 501c3, it's got to be a C3, not a C6, C4, C3. And you've got to submit the IRS determination letter. Basically, it states, yeah, they are recognized as a nonprofit. If it's a public school, again, official letter from the school on school letterhead. You'd be surprised. I've gotten, when reviewing neighborhood purpose grants, I've gotten the sheet of letterhead, and I've gotten the letter on a different piece of paper. I got to go with that. I always wondered why that was. Yeah, it's got to be on the letterhead. Community improvement projects, again, anything that you're doing to improve your community is a community improvement project. And it must be submitted to the department for the review and approval prior to issuing a check from the council check. You need to submit copies of the funding requests, the reports, the surveys, proof of additional insurance, and/or permits. And again, the permits are your contractor is going to have to obtain the permits and give you copies. You don't have to do the work for the contractor; they do. Okay. I know neighborhood councils kind of get a little crazy. And I have to go get permits. No, the contractor gets permits. The insurance requirements, the additional liability insurance requirements. The city's minimum requirement is $1 million liability, and the city has to be named as additional insurer. Sounds like a lot of work to do, but realistically, it's just a simple phone call that they make to the insurance company, and the insurance company faxes it over to the email. It's not as hard. It's not as scary as it sounds. Again, neighborhood councils again with the change in the checking account system had a lot of heartache when it came to events. Again, they expressed a lot of concerns. The department heard, and we streamlined that process as well. Came up with this approval form, which basically just you summarize everything as to what's happening with that event. You put down your neighborhood council, the type of event, and we made some changes to this form as well. You'll see that we've listed the event amount, okay, right over here. Again, we've incorporated the cash request form and the bank card exemption form into this form as well. Submit this for review along with your funding request and your budget. And on the back, we've listed some information as you may need. Because again, we've asked for it, we've requested at least 30 days to review for your submission of your event. The reason for that is as we're reviewing it, it may be determined that you may need permits. You may need permits for your event, so you'll have to work with the Department of Health to get those permits. You may need insurance. There's all things that may arise that you will have to do some legwork on. Again, and 30 days sometimes isn't enough for neighborhood council. We don't want you rushing to get your event done. So again, we're asking that you at least give us 30 days to help us help you. Okay, again, submit the completed package to EmpowerLA.funding@lacity.org. Can't forget that because people do. And once it's been approved, it will be emailed back to you along with your approval code. And again, once it's emailed back to you, funds will be transferred. And again, 3 to 5 days for that transfer to happen. And again, this is the required information that needs to be submitted. Funding request, the event budget, and like I said, the cash request and the bank exemption have been incorporated into the report. Okay, here's the test. Okay. Document submission. Almost. Here we go. One more time. Document submission. Okay, this is the test. What's the best way to submit anything to the department? What's the second best way? The second best way is hand deliver. If you happen to be in the area, hand deliver to the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. The address here is 200 North Spring Street, 20th floor. Third way, don't really recommend it because you can mail or fax it. Because again, things tend to get lost in the mail, and nowadays who really faxes it? Yeah, so again, the best way is the EmpowerLA.funding. Second best is the hand delivered through the department. Guess what? Neighborhood councils, don't stay in compliance. The department does have the authority to freeze your funds. We don't like freezing funds, but there are times when the department is required to freeze neighborhood council funds, and some of those are when there's no treasurer or second signatory in place. Okay? That's why I say whenever there's a change, you need to let us know as soon as possible, because we don't want to freeze your funds. If your funds are frozen, If you're missing 2 or more monthly expenditure reports, your funds are subject to being frozen. If your funds are frozen, the department will only pay operational expenses. We won't pay board member reimbursements. We won't pay neighborhood purpose grants, outreach, anything like that. Just operation. Your rent, your storage, your internet. Okay. So again, and the treasurer, the president are responsible for submitting those invoices to the department using the EmpowerLA funding. LA City funding. Again, we talked about unacceptable uses for the bank card. There's unacceptable purchases that the council can make, can't make. And again, a lot of them are the same, but the following are prohibited. Any purchase made without the approval of the neighborhood council board, whether it's not identified under the budget, payments for services over an extended period of time, split charges. Again, you know, you want to circumvent the single transaction, the daily the single transaction, you can't split payments. Okay? Well, and now that we've raised the limit, hopefully neighborhood councils won't have to be doing that. You can't donate, again, you can't donate money or goods to individuals or groups. It has to go through the MPG process, because otherwise it's considered a gift of public funds. Okay? You don't want to do that. Items or services from an entity that did not participate in the fair and open selection process. Again, these are public funds. Everybody has a fair, is entitled to a fair share of getting those opportunities. Any purchase or capital improvement projects that increase the value of private property, not public, but private. Okay? And they do not benefit the general public. Events or projects that do not have the required insurance or permits. Again, liability is a big issue for the city. It's a big issue for everybody these days. So you want to make sure that you're using licensed and permitted contractors. Third-party reimbursements. Again, this is another area that neighborhood councils get tripped up on. Third-party reimbursements aren't allowed. What's a third-party reimbursement? For instance, you're a board member, you send your spouse out to go get something for the neighborhood council. Your spouse can't submit a board member reimbursement, or can't submit a reimbursement. That's considered a third party. We have instances where an applicant will submit a neighborhood purpose grant for whatever project they got going. Someone from that organization will pay that vendor and submit and request that they be reimbursed for that. That's a third party. If they're not an NC board member, they will not get reimbursed. Again, purchases of gift cards, so money orders. Purchases that violate constitutional separation of church and state. City funds cannot be used to endorse religious or interfere with free religious exercise. Purchases that violate city or state conflict of interest laws. Supporting or opposing ballot measures. Lawsuits against the city or city agencies, and appeals against any discretionary decisions made by any city agency. NCs are not allowed to use PayPal. And the monthly expenditure report. And you know what? I'm going to take a quick break again at this point, and we'll be back shortly. What's up?
You can start again.
Yeah? Okay. Here we go. And we're back. Okay. The monthly expenditure report. Again, this is the reconciliation that everybody keeps talking about, everybody keeps dreading, because it's the monthly expenditure report. This is a recap of all the neighborhood councils' monthly expenses. Again, you said it, we heard it, we did it. We streamlined this process this morning. Okay? Who's going to complete the monthly expenditure report? The treasurer and the second signer are responsible for completing and submitting and signing the monthly expenditure report. It's the entire board who's responsible for reviewing and approving that MER after the treasurer has submitted it for approval. Once it's approved by the board, the treasurer is responsible for submitting that completed and voted on document within 10 days after your board meeting. 10 days after the last meeting for the following. If there are questionable purchases on your monthly expenditure report, the department will contact your treasurer regarding questions, request approved minutes for some of those expenditures. We will send a formal letter to the board, letting them know that there are questions. Freeze funds until questions have been sufficiently addressed. Again, freezing of neighboring council's funds is the last step we want to do. We don't want to. Why so much paperwork? Again, once again, neighbor council funds are public funds, and they need to be reconciled. Okay? All these documents, all these expenditures are subject to audit, not only by the department, but by the city controller and by constituents. People want to know how you're spending their money. Okay, this type of reporting will assist the neighborhood council in keeping track of how much they've spent and how much they have left on their budget. And again, the report offers transparency to stakeholders and the general public. Responsibility and accountability are key to maintaining the integrity and effectiveness of the neighborhood council system. Again, if you have any questions, again, further questions, EmpowerLA.funding at lacity.org, or you can call the department at 213-978-2551. Your funding division, Gracie Liu is our general manager. Armando Reese is the director. Betty Wong Oyama is the supervisor in charge of events. We have Todd Gonzalez, who's also a supervisor. Manquin Key, who's the accountant too. Mario Hernandez, myself. I review the events. Here's our emails, and this is who. This is the chain of command. Yep. Okay. Betty Wong supervises myself. Atsika Marena, me, Jessica Tua. Claude supervises Kadidi, Kathleen, and Janet Hernandez. Okay. Again, Kathleen Quinn. These are a list of her neighborhood councils that she's responsible for helping out. Kadidi Garner is your funding rep for these. Myself, yours truly. And we have Janet Hernandez. Okay. I think at this point, we're going to take questions. Because we will have a fill-in exercise, but I think if you have questions, now would be a good time.
Before you take the first question, can I just also stress that when you don't have a treasurer or signer in place, neighbor councils are not allowed to vote on any funding matters. Okay? If your funds are frozen, no voting on funding matters.
Yes, sir.
If the payee by card or assumed by check is the actual city of Los Angeles, some department, is there any shortcuts here, or just go to the normal?
So they have to give you an invoice.
But I'm saying, even though it is a city department,
They still need to give you an invoice. There is no shortcut.
there is nothing going directly to their fund, their no line item. Okay.
You got to issue a check.
You have to-
One thing that has come up with that is Department of Transportation. A lot of neighborhood councils have requested street closures or street postings.
Right.
That department will only accept checks or cash. Neighborhood councils can't use cash. And to process a check, it's going to take 3 to 5 days. In those instances, working with the department, we can make arrangements with that other department to say, hey, look, it's a neighborhood council. They will be sending the check. and they will process whatever request you
I
have.
was just thinking about parks, stuff like that, which are
They need to give you the,
business. Okay.
yes, Glenn?
So I have several questions. I'll, wait my turn, but I'm trying to group them because I guess you're just doing a free-for-all. You're not doing it by subject matter, right?
Right.
Okay. So on the subject of the functioning of the treasurer and second signatory, how does the department handle it when either one of them is no longer current under ethics training?
Well, they need to maintain that.
What if they don't?
Training.
What if they don't? And the question is there any grace that you give? I know there's no grace for voting on the board. Is there any grace that you give, or do you freeze the funds?
We freeze the funds.
Yeah, because again, they're not, well, yeah, they wouldn't have a, they wouldn't have a
Okay,
treasurer.
so then a related question is, because I have gotten complaints from some of my board members when they've submitted, not the treasurer, not the second signatory, when they've submitted their funding training, when they've submitted their ethics, that it takes weeks and weeks for it to get posted. And so so that's one issue, because we want to make sure that when they vote at a board meeting that they are eligible to vote as a board member. And then the other issue, obviously, if it affects a treasurer or second signer, if it's showing up as not being current, that may cause the freezing of the funds. So
I know that they are in the process of updating all those records, and if there is a question, there's, I believe, for the ethics training, there's a certificate that they print out. They can submit that if it does come into question. Unfortunately, we will have those instances where records have not been updated.
right, this goes back months. This is not just a recent situation. So
Yes. Well, like I said, I know they are in the process of updating all those records.
okay, give me to wait my turn.
Yeah.
Okay, neighborhood purpose grants
Okay.
topic. So when you had your roundtable, funding roundtables last fall, one of the issues I brought up was how we had an experience where a teacher got a hold of school letterhead and submitted it for the NPG without the principal's knowledge, even though somehow the principal signed the other paperwork. And so I had recommended that anything that's submitted on school letterhead have not only a signature, but have a title of who that person was, because what got submitted was just someone's name. It turned out it was a teacher who had no authority to do that. And I just read through your documentation, and that recommendation wasn't addressed, but it is a problem that could help other neighborhood councils avoid happening. So that just comment. And the other thing on I guess related to neighborhood purpose grants that you touched on in terms of no board member could participate in being a party to applying for an NPG. The question is, for a committee of the neighborhood council made up of board members and stakeholders, if there's a stakeholder member of the committee, non-board member, who is a party to the NPG or works for the entity that's putting in the NPG, do they have the same restrictions? So they are a formal committee member, but they're not on the board. But there is a decision, a recommendation made by the committee to the board.
I would refer that question to the city attorney, just to be on the safe side. Because again, you always want to err on the side of caution. Because like I said, the last thing you want to do is taint that purpose grant from going any further and prohibiting that organization from requesting funds from that neighborhood council. So the best thing to do for that individual is to contact the city attorney, or one of the board members contact the city attorney.
That was my advice, but they didn't take my advice. So that's why I wanted to bring it up here to see if it was. But I can't force someone to contact the city attorney, and I can't force the committee chairperson to take whatever action. All I can do is report it to somebody,
Right.
or bring it up when it comes to the board meeting, which I'd rather not do, because that makes the board meeting have a messy situation.
Yeah. Okay. I'll come back to you.
So my question is on community improvement projects.
Mhm.
So first it's a question, and then a suggestion.
Okay.
So the question is, could you just spell out the steps, simplify them for me, of what paperwork is required to fund a community improvement project? And then my comment would be, could you please write it out and make it available to neighborhood councils? Okay, go.
It's actually in your packet already. It's on the pre-submission checklist.
Pre-submission.
Mhm.
There's a vent checklist.
Was
The
it
vent
pre-
checklist is for CIPs. Is that what you're saying?
No, it's a separate thing that breaks down.
There you go.
The funding request. Okay.
No, it's actually an app on handout as well.
So the only thing you want is a funding request form with the appropriate signatories and a community benefit statement. That's all you need in order to fund it.
Whatever.
For now.
If there's something that does need an addition, after review funding requests, we will contact the treasurer for additional information. But this is what's required.
So we know that there's gonna be more required if it's a
There could
planning
be.
project. So there are
could be.
some, give me a situation where you will not ask for any additional information. One example, anything. What's that CIP that doesn't require anything more than a funding request and a community benefit statement? Is there anything? Okay, so the answer is
I
no.
can't think of anything else.
So I would appreciate it if we had a real list, a real working list. Because what it means is slowing down the funding and getting the project implemented and funded.
Well, see, I mean, you have to realize that there's always a comment for every situation. Not everything is cookie cutter. So again, this is the basic information that we will need to review that item. And it could be that there may be additional items requested. Could be that it'll fly just like that. I can't give you an example off the top of my head because, I mean, there's tons of documents that we review every day. So again,
So of all the tons, none of them fly by with those two pieces of documentation.
again, I'm not going to say yes, I'm not going to say
Okay.
no. Okay.
All right.
But again, I will say that nothing's cookie cutter. Yes.
I have a question regarding the reimbursement. This lady is a formerly board member, and but the past administration did not pay her. So now she's claiming her.
Something like that, we should probably have a discussion. It's going to be a little bit more involved. So we probably want to talk about that afterwards. Okay. Yeah, but there'll be some research on that. You bet. So,
With the NPGs, it goes and says on page 21 of the thing that NCs must evaluate and approve grant requests in public meetings and make a finding of public benefit. As was talked about before, the committee of the neighborhood council makes a recommendation.
Right.
Then it comes to the board, but the board isn't really going and evaluating it on their own. So to me, this is saying that the board is supposed to actually look at the NPG and evaluate it, and not just have it be from the committee.
well, because
And actually have copies, at least the one for the public. And
again, because the committee makes a recommendation to the board, it's ultimately up to the board's decision on whether they want to approve the grant or not.
But the thing is, this says the NC must evaluate and approve grant requests in public meetings and make a finding of public benefit. The neighborhood council is supposed to do it,
Right.
not a committee is supposed to do it.
Well, no, the committee, again, neighborhood councils can establish their committees to review. Some of them do. Again, those committees will make recommendations to the full board, and it's up to the board to make that determination if there's a public benefit. Just because it's been recommended or suggested, they don't have to vote, they don't have to take a recommendation. So yeah, they are required, they must make that evaluation.
And hopefully there would end up being copies available.
They should be made available to,
The board members,
To the board members
and
and-
there has to be at least one for Brown Act.
there should be, yes.
For the public. And if it isn't, then it would be a Brown Act violation for that.
Potentially could be. You know, I can't say yes or no, but yeah, potentially could be. Back here in the community.
Okay, I have just only do a handful. In the transition for the new funding request form, if we have recurring expenses that were approved at the beginning of the fiscal year, should we transfer those board count votes onto this form? Should we just attach the one we've been using and then redo it?
You probably want to transition over because again, this is going to take place with the old funding requests.
So in doing that, I can put the current date that we actually signed it, even though we voted on it in July. Okay. I'll do that.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Two questions.
Can we go back? So on that the funding request, it needs to have the date that you voted. The meeting date, right?
Okay.
When you transfer the information over.
So this date will do the original date that we voted on. Okay.
Yes, sir.
I'm new as a treasurer, and we haven't done December yet. Can I use these new forms for December?
Yes.
Yes. And are they online? Are they available?
They will be online tomorrow.
Oh, that's good now.
Tomorrow, like I said, Monday for days.
Okay, and then the second question I have is, Betty and I were talking earlier, if we have an organization, that used to be the head of Studio City Beautification, it's a C3. If they come to the neighborhood council and say they'd like $3,000 for tree trimming on Ventura Boulevard, since they're C3, can we just give them the money directly, or do we have to do the vendor?
You can do an NPG, but if
That's great, that's easier. Or as long as they're a C3, you can use an NPG,
Right,
regardless of the activity.
right. And again, depending on the type of, the scope of the work, what they're going to be using the funds for, and the dollar amount, and name the contract.
Okay, great. Thank you.
yes.
Two questions. For the NPG, what is the minimum amount that should be included in the NPG?
There is no minimum. That's discretionary of the neighborhood council.
Okay. Second question. There are three sources of funding requests from before the general board votes on it. From the committee, executive committee, from the budget and finance, or from the outreach committee. And so sometimes the funding request comes from the outreach and it goes to the general board immediately. Is that acceptable on your part?
It goes from the committee to
Outreach.
From the outreach
to the board.
to the general board for for approval.
Again, it's the neighborhood council. We will not dictate how the neighborhood council conducts its business. Your bylaws, will state how things have to be done. Again, committees can only make recommendations to the board. It's the board that's going to take the formal action. So they can make all kinds of recommendations, but it's ultimately up to the board. How they drive the paperwork, it's up to the neighborhood council.
The reason why I questioned, I raised that question is that any stakeholders wants that for every funding request from either the two committees, it should pass first to the budget and finance committee. But I said no, it's direct to the general board for votation.
Again, that's something
That is our discretion, right?
that's something the board would have to make a determination. Yes,
Okay, thank you.
The bank statements
yes, ma'am.
that we have on a monthly basis,
Mhm.
they are not putting down the name of who they're paying out to. They're putting down a reference number. And it makes it real difficult. The only reason I know who's being paid, because I know how much the amount is.
Right.
But and it's a different reference number for the same vendor each month.
I know that, there are some issues that Union Bank is still working through, and we've addressed some other concerns that have come up. Best thing to do is send an email to EmpowerLA with your concern, and we can have the bank address that, see if there's something they can do. Okay? Yeah, and then I'll go back.
Okay. On the funding request form approval code, it indicated it goes only to the treasurer. Is there any way that we could get it copied routinely to, say, the second signer or some other person? Because we have had a situation where it got overlooked and it caused problems. So I know there was some conversation in the past about copying all the board. I think that may be excessive, but I think that it would be helpful to have at least a couple of other people. You've already got the second signer. In our case, you've got the bank card holder. You got 3 people who filled out all the paperwork. And I'm just wondering, is there any way that could be done, maybe on request?
I think the department practice is anytime that we're submitting or returning an approval, it goes back to the treasurer, second signer, and committee person. That's becoming the practice now. I know I've been doing that on events that I've been submitting back.
Is that the department standard? Because I can tell you we had an issue that went on for several months, and I sent numerous emails to the funding, not knowing who was the actually, I didn't know who the person was, but he was out for an extended time. So, but no one else seemed to be able to access it. But if it's the funding rep who's responsible to communicate that, if that's the department standard, then we need to make sure all 4 funding reps follow that.
And you're right, then there should be all 4 funding reps to follow that. So when they send back an email to the treasurer advising of the funding request has been approved or not, and receive approval code, it does go to the treasurer, the signer, and it should go to the president. And in fact, we had recommended it should go to the executive committee, the board, it's their board. Okay. Now we CC your NEA and the supervisors and your funding rep.
Well, I copied all of that. Nobody, it's the NEA. Anyway, all right. That would be good if you could do that on a consistent basis. You mentioned that on your list of approvals that all election expenses be approved. That seems to be new from last year or from 2000. Yeah, last year. I'm just saying that's the first time hearing about it. And as far as what neighboring council. So no, I'm not talking about the election procedure stipulation worksheet. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about any expenditures that are election related. It looks like you have to get advanced department approval because it was on that list.
That's correct. In the past, the board would vote X amount of dollars for the elections. We say $5,000 for election expenses. When it's time to expand the funds, you need to vote again as to who the vendor is and the total amount and what it's for. If it's over X amount of dollars, it needs to come back to the department for review and approval.
Okay, what's that X? 2,500? All right, so that slide is misleading because it doesn't say more than 2,500. I mean, I can give you numerous examples where we put, advertisements, where we did, electronic and et cetera, that we never requested approval and no one ever said anything that we should have. And I'm aware of many other neighboring councils. So maybe it should say election expenses for greater than 2,500 for that particular item.
Right, but it has to be for each vendor. Okay, for each item, for each separate vendors that needs to be paid. So, for example, it's going to be $1,000 for an ad in the daily newspaper. That needs to be voted separately by the board.
Right.
If there's another ad to go to the LA Times, again, that needs to be voted.
Right. That all happened. That happened. There's no problem. We've had board count forms. What that list shows is that it was just like with your funding, with your neighbor purpose grant. It's listed page 7. Thank you. Yeah, so it's page 7 at the top, or it says page 13. It says the following must be board approved and submitted to the department for review and authorization. And, it just says election. So that my concern about, first I wanted to understand it, because that seems like a change, but I also know that that would be an issue, not this year, but coming up, with the turnaround time of getting approvals and the number of transactions that are election related.
Let's get clarification on these interactions. It'll be in the newsletter, but I'll also contact you.
Yes.
On that note, I'm wondering about outreach is on there.
Yes.
So that I knew that's the same issue. I would think you mentioned being in good standing with the inventory report. Is there a standardized template or guideline on what needs to be on an inventory report? Because I know prior treasurer told me, but this is the first official word I've heard of it.
From what I understand is there is an inventory log sheet that is existed right now, but it's in the process of being updated. So I'm looking at it in the near future. Yes, ma'am.
So once it's completed, you will mail that out to us and notify us, because we don't, I know we had something about 5 or 6 years ago, but we don't have anything now for a law.
Right, we're still using the same law that we've used the past few years since we started. It is required for the neighbor councils to submit this law, inventory law, yearly at the end of the year with your budget. Okay.
Question.
Receipt. You had indicated that email was the best option, but you want original receipt, so we still have to mail or hand deliver.
Right, so this is for your MERs. The MERs should be hand delivered or mailed to the department with the original receipts. Okay, what we were talking about was, me and Mario, with the funding request, MPGs, that you can submit electronically, fax, or whatever, and deliver. But the MERs have to be submitted by mail, US mail, or we need the original receipts.
Yeah. Thanks. Is there another question?
If, for the Valley folks, yes, you may drop it off at the Van Nuys office. We ask that you do not staple the receipt. Tape it on to a 8.5 by 11 paper. Okay, just tape it, scotch tape.
Yes.
This is the first I've really stopped for member reimbursements, which sounds like extremely helpful. I was wondering if there's ever any plans to, or the union to be able to have a card for both the treasurer and the signer, or more than one card.
This is
Okay, so about the lease, we haven't completed the list of our office yet. Now, what's the procedure, what's the step? It will be approved first by the general board, or it will be approved by Dan first before it will go to the process?
I believe it would have to be approved by the board, and then it would get submitted to the department for review, signatures, all that good stuff.
Thank you.
Back to the bank card question. So, and I have to say, this is not something that affects the bank card that I hold. It's a different neighbor council. Whereby the bank card holder gave it to someone else, and because they had to sign for the receipts, and that signature would be on the receipts and declare that it was done by somebody else. My question is, so I know you're not supposed to, that only the card holders, the ones who use the card holder, not that it's given. My question is, if you see that on the receipt that someone else used it, is that something that you would take some action over if it was called to your attention or could be discovered?
Yes, it would be brought up to the supervisors in the planning division, and we would investigate.
And then another question is, Some neighborhood councils, and I know it's a small minority, have alternates, board members. They are required to take ethics, funding, and code of conduct. The question is, are they considered, do they get different answers depending on if I talk to NEAs or I talk to elections and outreach and communication? Are they considered for the purpose of reimbursement board members that they would be entitled to get reimbursement for out-of-pocket expenses for board authorized?
If they were the alternate at that particular time when the original, the real person or board member is not available and he came in as the alternate?
No, they come to the board and vote when the board member is not present that night. But they are otherwise an alternate continuously, day in, day out, month after month.
And they're still an alternate when they come to vote, because when you go in and list them, they're not the board rep, they're the alternate.
Right.
In the minutes. So they're always an alternate.
Yeah, the only time that their status changes if the rep is not present during the board meeting, they can sit at the table and vote. But as Sharon said, they're still an alternate. And if the rep came in halfway through the meeting, they're going to go back to the audience. They're still an alternate. But the question is, for the purpose of reimbursement, if they're considered board members and they're eligible to get reimbursed as
a board member, and if they were representing the board as the alternate at that particular time, yes, they will get reimbursed.
well, they were maybe doing an event or project or something. And
Or the neighbor, or the neighbor council that was approved?
Yeah.
Yes.
I have my last one, I promise. I know you said over and over again, the signatures are always treasurer and second signatory. Can you give us a little background on, for the last option says other non-funding items, why it's still the treasurer?
On board vote.
On the board scale? There's like, there's MER, the budget package, funding officer makes sense, but then like other non-funding.
Meaning if you're going to vote on, to revise your bylaw, you have to vote on that.
So I guess my
that's
question is like, why would a treasurer sign off on that?
It's a non-funding, it will be the secretary.
Okay,
So
so
then you do not need to have the authorized signers, it will be the secretary and the president.
so in the event that it's non-funded, treasurer becomes secretary and signer becomes president.
This subject brought it up. We have a prior treasurer who had, it's not material, but, it's a small amount of money for duplication expense and whatnot to submit the MER. That's left over. Now he's gone. Can I still reimburse you for that?
Yes, you just need to provide the supporting documents.
Thanks.
Yes.
Has the department ever thought of going and putting a time limit on how long, that board members can get reimbursed if they go and they pay for something, maybe in December, and then suddenly at the end of the year in June, they want to get reimbursed, and could be to the tune of $6,000.
And that is in discussion with upper management.
The thing is, I think if you
Yes.
put the limit on it,
Right.
it would end up going, because it's harder to get the receipts, get the information, and if there's like within X amount of time of, the event and stuff like that, I think you'll have a better time. And also when it comes to the signer, the treasurer and the signer, ended up having an issue where I signed the paperwork and our second signer took a month. I still don't have the card. I think that you need to just totally freeze funds. They shouldn't have access, because then they're going to take and go and do the paperwork and get it done if they know that there's no access, that you guys can pay the operations, but they're not going to be able to go and do any online checking and stuff like that, because like I said, mine waited a month, and I did mine on December 12th. He did it like a month later in January. I don't have the card, and I don't have access to the bank statement or the online checking, and if he couldn't access that stuff,
He shouldn't have access to it.
oh, he's been
He's been writing
doing this
He's been-
online, yeah,
And then happen to that.
God.
He's been writing ever since the treasurer, actually before. He has access to it.
Yeah, I don't.
That reminds me of a question that I had, and that is for purposes of oversight, because I'm not a treasurer, I'm a secretary. Can anyone go to the account and look at account activity to see what is our neighborhood council spending money on? Has something that was perhaps voted upon and approved, been approved of, been funded?
I understand that.
For transparency.
I think it's there's general works where the treasurer or second senator can give like, read-only access
Exactly.
to other board members.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's in the works. I'm not sure exactly where that is.
Because we can have better
Yeah.
oversight.
Well, email that question to EmpowerLA. And we can further investigate that with you. We do have kind of like a fill-in exercise on the new forms. So if there's aren't there any more questions, I want to run through those really quick. Okay. You guys all have the forms?
We doing points?
Yeah. Or did you want to?
No, no. I was just gonna ask something.
Okay. Won't take long, I promise. Okay, I believe you all have the forms in your packet. So if we can start with the funding request form. And again, I kind of want you all to go along and just fill in as we go. Everybody have their forms up? Okay, as I said earlier, this does incorporate the funding request form and the board vote and the cash request and the exemption. So again, first part of the information you're going to fill out is going to be your neighborhood council name, the budget fiscal year, when the request is being made, the meeting date, and the agenda item. Again, this is all information that as we're reviewing these, if you're submitting these to the department for review and approval, it's so much easier to have the information to hand. Okay, the requester again can be any board member, can be the treasurer, second signer, can be the vendor. Okay, in this particular case, it's Jan Moore. Okay, the vendor in this particular case is going to be ABC Foundation. You're going to list their address to 201 North Grant Street. Again, pretty self-explanatory. The amount of the request. Okay, again, this is going to be really important that you fill it out completely because anything that's incomplete will delay the whole process. What category does it fall under? In this particular case, it's a neighborhood purpose group. Okay. The public benefit statement. Again, it's kind of a weak benefit statement. You want to make sure that you've got something substantial in it. Okay. Sorry?
I said that's more of a description, it's not a benefit statement.
Again, like I said, it's pretty weak. You don't want to do this. This is an example of what not to do.
So much for saying that.
So what would be a better description, sir?
Well, I'll leave it up to you guys.
ABC Foundation Prize.
There
There
you
you
go.
Okay, before he continues, I'm passing out an evaluation form. We need you to grade us how we're doing as your trainer. And also is the registration form that you attended this training, so you will get credit for it, okay? Please return by the end of the meeting.
Regarding the P card and getting new P card.
Okay, there's no P card, there's no purchase card, there's a bank card.
Or the bank.
You didn't get your
I haven't, you know, no, but I'm waiting for the card for the one I called. After, you know,
I don't understand,
I can share your.
Janet is your rep.
Yeah.
You should use the-
You can do it from, yeah. So again, we've incorporated the board vote, so you would just fill in the board members' names, their position, and how they voted. Also, new on this form is the quorum. You know, what constitutes quorum for your neighborhood council. List that in there. And then, like I said, the form will tally all your votes for you. You don't have to worry about that. Okay?
The thing is, though, to go and do that assignment, what the student's done is we go and redo the names, the positions and stuff, and we mark the thing. They tell you their information, I sign it, and we're done. You end up, is it still gonna be able to go and do it like that? Because otherwise, you've got to have access to the computer and a way of printing it out,
You know,
which is more.
we'll take a handwritten form. However, again, best practice is going to be there.
But the thing is, with us, so that we don't have to meet again and stuff like that, we take care of this stuff at the meeting where it's been voted on and it's then done. If you have to fill this out, then it's going to be more troublesome unless you happen to have a computer and a printer at your meeting. So it's just a question, because I know
And again-
Cindy's concerned about it.
And again, like I'm saying, this is preferred. This is the best practice. Again, we'll still take a handwritten statement. But again, we're trying to streamline it for everybody. And again, we're trying to make it as easy as possible. But again, this is the preferred. And we'll take a handwritten. Okay. Again, it's whatever the neighborhood council.
Yep, but then you'd have to get the signature again, because it has to be the
Again,
original
Sharon,
signature.
it's what
Well, no, I
the
was,
neighborhood
like I
council
said,
is comfortable with. So.
They sign after the fact. It's
Digital signature?
No, they. only what's in the original.
And again, another way of doing this too is you can email it back and forth, scan it, sign it, scan it, email it to the next person, sign it, scan it, and submit. Again, certification has been streamlined. We got rid of including the names of the neighborhood council and just kind of made it more generic, easier to understand and work with. Still requires the signatures of the treasurer and second signer. Again, we've added this section down here for department review. What exactly is it? Who's reviewing it? Who's doing the first and second level of approval and the authorization? Once it's been approved, as the form states, the amount will be transferred into the neighborhood council. Any questions?
So I appreciate the effort to consolidate, but what we do or have done using the funding request form is anyone, stakeholders, anyone, we have them, if they say we want to, whatever, we have them fill that form out, sometimes it's by hand, and then they turn it into us. It then gets, handled by our committee, on the board, it kind of initiates that process. And our actual board count form is done through the process that Carol explained, which is it's done online, you fill the PDF. So I guess my question is, in the past, basically the funding request form was done by others, not by us, but now it looks like we're going to have to take what they have typically hand-filled out, the top part is what they're going to fill out.
I mean, the third party can still fill the section out right here. They can do it.
Well, right now they fill out the entire funding request form.
Right.
The old form, they fill out the entire thing.
This is the only part that they'll fill out. And everything else will be up in the new case.
Okay, so anyway, so you don't care then that they fill that out, but then we take that and, because we are gonna do ours to the fillable PDF. So we'll just copy over what they've done and recopy it, retype it if you will.
Or, like I said, they can start on this form, and give it, present it to the board, and you can fill it in. I mean, it's whatever's gonna work for the neighborhood council.
Okay, well then the issue is, if they do that as a fillable, if we tell them they have to do it as a fillable PDF and save it and email it, I guess, so that we can then access that same form.
Again,
So I've had issues with being able to, I've had people try to do the fillable PDF, email it to me, and then when I open it up, it's blank.
this, I believe this is an Excel form. So, it's Excel.
But for some reason on my side, when I have it, I can fill it out, then I can save it as, and I can pull it later and it's all the data's there. But when I send it to Glad, he opens the file and it's just a blank form. And I cannot understand why he do that. So I'm forced to print it, scan it, and then send a PDF, which he cannot edit.
I don't know when it would be.
She needs to save it a different way. If however she saved it the first time, she has to put it in. I don't know what it is, but I believe it's a problem. You need to save it as a different name. I mean, it's kind of silly, but then send it to him.
I do say that changing one name. I do name it very specifically, it's totally different, but it's no longer an editable PDF. And it does not save the content from there. I don't know why.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but like I said, these forms are Excel.
And then when we find out the correct way to do it, then
Now, I know that these forms were sent out to all the neighborhood councils for the comments and trying it out. And
Yeah, but I don't know if it was, we got paper, we were handed out paper copy.
I think it was.
I got electronic copies, and I filled them out, I just couldn't get rid of the ones.
Yeah. Or draft.
But I'm like,
Any other questions on the funding request form?
I do.
Yes.
So where it says multiple number of payments, that's what you were talking about, that,
Like the storage or.
like the storage, right? And so we would just put a general amount there
Or the number of payments, 12.
and then put like $300 about.
Right.
But like internet, that isn't always.
Internet, let's say the budget's $300.
Just round it off, just round it, okay.
Because the amount may fluctuate, but it should be pretty consistent throughout the year.
Okay, so that's the number that we should put there in the amount, the rounded number.
I think, yes.
So we have to do one of these for like storage monthly?
Again, when you vote your budget, beginning of the year, you'll have a line item, you'll be voting on storage, like I said, $1,200 for the year, $100 a month. So you'll take that vote one time, make 12 copies of that, and attach that to your storage invoice for each month.
so that's the same thing with internet.
Same, yes. Anyone else on this one? Okay. Again, this is the board vote count, the board vote form. Again, this is only going to be used for your submittal of your monthly expenditure report, the budget package, the appointment of your funding officers or part holder, and any other non-funding action items. Okay, so out the same way, your neighborhood council name, the fiscal year, the meeting date, the agenda item. What it's being used for in this particular case is monthly expenditure report. Description of what is being voted on. Again, your board members' names, the positions, how they voted, form, and telling the votes. Like I said, the forms will automatically do that. If you choose to handwrite them, take them, but again, this is the preferred best practice. Yes, sir.
Why did you have the treasurer vote no when it's on MDR?
It was, maybe he didn't agree with them. I don't know.
Actually, one more than half.
What did I have on that?
There's 8 people.
Yeah, you're right. That should be a typo. Good catch. That was actually part of the test. You passed.
Well, we get some jobs.
Those big bylaws. So Sun Valley has 21 board members and they have a quorum of 7. So it's not always.
What is it really based on? It's not based on, I thought it was based on, oh, it's not based on the number of.
It's usually half plus 1, but again, the bylaws would dictate.
And the bylaws have been approved, so.
I'm sorry?
And the bylaws were approved.
Yeah. So like Lynn was saying, the one council has 21, but the quorum is 7. It's kind of different, but, you know.
So is this form implying that you're supposed to be taking vote counts on?
If you're taking votes on other non-funding items, yes.
If we are we required? Implying that you want us to start using everything and so on.
Again, if you choose to.
Okay, but it's not required. Only the funding items are required. Okay.
Oh, that one. Can you take a laptop?
Yeah. Okay. And again, the certification has been streamlined. With signatures again. If it's not a funding item, it doesn't have to be in the treasurer. The cash request form, like I said, same form that's been used throughout the year. You can fill in the cash receipt to date, the amount of the current cash request. And basically, it's going to calculate for you what your remaining budget is. In this particular case, they have $28,000 left. Whenever we've gotten cash requests submitted into the department for review, one part that neighborhood councils will get to fill in is this the previous day bank payment. It's important to figure in there because, again, as I said, Union Bank requires that neighborhood councils maintain $1,000 in their account to avoid service fees. What the form will do and what the formulas calculate is they take into consideration that $1,000, back it out of your current balance, and basically give you an adjusted bank balance. Okay, it'll do the math based on this your current request less this number here, and the approved cash request could be $4,000. However, if the neighborhood council says, hey, you know what, I really need those $5,000 because I've got this outreach event, I've got these operational expenses I need to pay, the department will transfer $5,000. Okay.
Is that a phone call?
It's a phone call, or it's actually listed on this section right here.
Okay.
Under the comments.
All right.
Like I said, this form right here doesn't require formal board action. It's just a conversation between the treasurer and second signer. Submit it to the department. And again, like I said, that's all. Okay. And I think there was a question on it.
Yeah, so I just wanted to be clear. So this cash request is to always have that $4,000 in our budget. In our account, right? And if we, for whatever reason, we need to get we can ask for 5,000 more or have up to 5,000? The last part that you were just.
The department will replenish all the accounts at the beginning of the month back to $4,000. You don't need to submit this form. That's automatically done. In the event that the neighborhood council requires additional funds for whatever expenses are going to be incurring, then they will submit this form.
Okay.
If you're, and again, we've incorporated this form into a lot of the other forms that you're gonna be using, you won't have to be using this one as much. But in the event that you do, the council does require additional funds, you would use this one.
So I think we had an issue, right?
Yeah,
So
we
we
did.
could have just,
We had like $3,000 in our checking account. We had checks pending for neighborhood purposes grants for $5,000. So our treasurer kept trying to get the maximum amount of money so that he wouldn't bounce anything. But because the bank statement showed a large balance, then the department wouldn't approve the total amount of money that was needed to make sure that all of the outstanding checks would be clear.
Really? What council are you in?
Mid-City.
Mid-City?
Kathleen. So it was like what the balance is on any given day doesn't take into account what are your outstanding checks.
Right. Again,
your couple checks that hadn't been cashed.
Right.
if, again, like I said, if the council comes back and says, no, I need the $5,000 for the RPG that's gonna be paid,
Okay.
it shouldn't be an issue.
Okay, very good.
There should be no question.
Okay.
Let's put that in the comments.
That's right. You can, yeah, just put it into the comments.
Right. Thank you.
Since the new MER for the cash reconciliation, that does fund is positive to date as one lump sum and doesn't break it down by budget code. Is there a reason that this still does? With like the cash receipts date? Yeah,
Well,
I like that it was simplified here.
Yeah.
I was wondering if that was maybe an oversight.
Well, you
as far
still,
as-
we'll go over the MER, but you still kind of have to keep track of what is it being spent by for the categories.
Right, but as far as the cash deposit, it's no longer broken down. So like presumably we'll stop tracking it. We just say we've got 4,000 today, not 2,000 here and 2,000 there.
Let me get, okay. So if there's no other questions on capital question?
One question, if you put in NPG, the formal NPG, you don't have to go through this test, right?
Right, because we've incorporated that.
Right.
Yes.
Are you gonna be holding money or allowing the money to be secreted for elections that we've done previously?
I'm sorry?
Are you gonna be to impound money for the elections that happen after the change of things? So the money's not swept back, use it or lose it, it's actually for the elections. So,
Okay, my understanding is the neighbor councils are gonna have access to their funds all the way up through, you want to give yourselves at least a week for check clearing, but the neighbor councils technically will have access to their funds up to June 30th.
Wow. That's new. That's new.
Yeah.
no, this is just because we had the problem before with the money for the
Yeah,
election.
because again, we were on a different checking system. This year, like I said, the neighbor council will have access to the funds up to June 30th. But if you're gonna be cutting checks, you yourself want to cut off maybe like a week before to allow for the check clearing. Okay?
But I think what he's asking is, in the past, before the 2014 elections, there was 2012, we were allowed to designate a certain amount that we knew we weren't going to spend, and that was put in, basically carried through. But that was special action of city council, and I don't think it, I don't think.
Yeah, that I haven't heard that, so I don't think that would be the case. Okay. Any other questions on this one?
Is there any talk of coming any fund at all? Because I heard there's a possibility that there'll be a rollover carryover of a small percentage.
I hadn't heard that. We're lobbying for it.
Okay.
We're lobbying the council.
and declare an event is supposed to be coming, see, this is our budget, but the event is for August. But the funds that we're want to use are from this fiscal year.
There, like I said, there's always a comma, however,
Okay.
for certain for specific cases. I know that there's a neighborhood council that has a humongous community event that's in August. And the planning all starts in June. So I think there will be specific analysis for items like that. Okay, I know they're in talks. There's always a common element. There's always a common element. Like I said, the neighborhood purpose grant, again, like I said, used to be 3 or 4 pages long. It's been reduced to 2 pages. Okay. Information, again, since put your neighborhood council name, the grant, the applicant's information in. Business addresses if it's the same. Primary contact information. Again, you want to make sure that you've got the phone number and the emails in there. And the type of organization that's requesting the money. In this particular case, it's a 501c3. And so you want to make sure that you attach that IRS determination. Again, the purpose of the intent of the grant. In this particular case, they're going to provide educational resources for educate. Provide resources to the community for healthy living and healthcare is open to the general public and children. And this is an example of what not. It's pretty weak, but you get the idea.
Turn it back, please.
Sure. Yes.
Haven't shown us what not to do at some point in the future. Can you give us a better example of what's a great example that's well done? Positive reinforcement.
Okay.
Grab a good one. Somebody must have.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do it. Yes.
Just because we've had this come up, how would you classify a public charter school? Public charter school, or public school?
If they're under LA Unified, it's public.
Any other district?
Now, if it's a private charter school,
No.
I don't know.
Because we LA.
Yeah. That's probably a question that has to be addressed. So, right. Well, you know what? I know that there was a neighborhood council who wanted to approve a grant because their kids, a lot of the kids from the community played sports in this one organization that wasn't in their area.
Says they went over there with the park on the other side of the freeway.
Yes, and that
Yeah.
was not allowed. So, but again, it's always in case by case.
So we've been glad to do things like that, and I wondered if we should be looking at where those children reside.
Yeah.
Because you're benefiting those children.
Again, it's one of those instances that requires competition. Okay, this is the second page of the MPG grant. Again, totally formatted here. This information is it's from the old application, pretty standard. You know, how's the money going to be spent? Other sources of funding. One of the things that's new on here, and this up here, is has the applicant applied to any of the neighborhood council requesting funds for this project?
Well, thank you.
You know.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Why?
Because again, there's organizations that kind of go shopping.
Yeah, we got it.
At the end of the budget
One
year.
of those schools.
Yeah.
Oh, but we got kids from
Yeah. So this is going to be helpful.
Does it get declined because of that, or?
It's up to the board.
Sometimes the big event and several very councils I can see where it's
Yeah.
and the other times people are trying to make it done, never mind. So it goes away.
Exactly.
That's a nonprofit that they
you know, hit everybody, but they're where they are.
Right.
And like Van Nuys, but they're getting Casino and Reseda and all that kind of stuff.
Well, an example was ZOS, the Valley Academy of Arts and Sciences, and they were going there, several surrounding neighborhood councils asking for the same amount,
Yeah.
for $3,100. I said, no, if 40% of your students are in my neighborhood council, then you should only be asking me for 40% of them, $3,100.
Yeah,
I mean, there's gotta be a logic to it, but you don't ask everybody for the full amount. What if we all did the whole amount? They're like, woo-hoo,
Or
Exactly.
the same stuff.
Exactly. So, well, here's a couple of nuances to this form. You know, like I said, you know, we include this section here. You know, has to be applied to any of the neighborhood councils. A couple of new things here. The source of funding, the start date, and the expected completion date. Okay. And this right here for the neighborhood councils is when do you require the funds into your account? Okay, it's always good to know. One new thing that the department is going to be kind of getting a little more stricter on is the follow-up. Because again, there have been applicants that have requested money, they've been granted money, and they've used it for something else. Okay.
Well, they just go away and never even come back and report. That's unacceptable.
Exactly, and really the onus is up to the neighborhood council to kind of do the follow-up. Okay, now it's being required that they do the follow-up. Okay. Right.
Right now.
And I believe it's being, that's even being okay. Now this section right here, the potential conflict of interest, this is also new on the form. It says, do you, the applicant, have a former or existing relationship with a board member of the neighborhood council? Yes or no? Okay, in this particular case, they have no. They have no. But if they did, you want to list that information right here, what the relationship is. And if it's yes, you want to make sure that there's a conversation had with the city attorney. Okay, because again, the last thing you want to do is have this thing conflicted and basically become tainted, where this organization would be prohibited from requesting funds from the neighborhood council.
But they don't have any guidelines for us? Like,
They're
we go
actually-
to the same church, but there's no material or there's no benefit being derived. We just happen to go to the same church.
It's a,
You're a community member with the person.
I still want them signing.
you,
I would think it would be based upon a benefit. Either way.
and that's why I say you need to have a question, have a conversation.
They don't have. They should.
Because there's data here
Yeah.
about NPG conflicts. That was
And
all.
again, the follow-up on that, and more information on that.
Actually, we're gonna go with the MER. And that's been revised and we're almost done. Again, this section right here has been revised by the city attorney. Again, affirming to the best of their knowledge that the information provided is communicated otherwise. Basically, there's no conflict. There should be. Okay. 2 signatures. Okay. And they have to be actual signatures, no digital signatures when they do the application. Okay. I'm sorry? Red signature. Exactly.
I know, that's what I'm saying. That means they want to see you go and sign it.
They want Lillian.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the new revised monthly expenditure report. This has probably been the biggest headache for a lot of neighborhood councils. And again, this has been revised where it's going to calculate it all for you now. It's been somewhat simplified to some degree. Again, you got to start filling in the reporting month and the neighborhood council name. For some reason, neighborhood councils don't like to put their name down. It's required. And this form is really easy because on the right side right here, if you look at when you go online, there's a little drop down arrow. Select it. Again, everything that's in white is what you're gonna fill in. Okay, everything else is gonna be locked out. There's no need to change it. Okay. In this particular case, you just list the date, the item, on 12/2, your street banners, your operations, the vendor. You're gonna put the dollar amount. It's gonna calculate it down here for you. Okay. Outstanding commitments. Again, this number right here. Oops. Right here. Okay, this number right here in blue, again, is going to be filled, pre-filled from page 2 that you'll see right now. And your outstanding checks, again, you'll have a list somewhere that you fill this number.
Yeah, so anything in blue would be pre-filled, so the
No,
cumulative
white.
expense would be pre-filled. So cumulative expenditures, is that pre-filled? Is it like a workbook that has a sheet for every month?
Right, it should be it'll be on the same page.
No, not
But the
the,
reason it's not white is because it's gonna autofill because it's got the sum.
Right.
It's doing the
It's linked to another.
calculation.
right, the subtotal,
You're talking about this one right here?
no, line B.
Yeah. That's going to pre-fill, that totals on page 2. Comes from page 2. You'll see. And again, everything in blue is pre-filled from page 2. You can see right here. Okay. The beginning balance right here in column A, that's going to be the ending balance of your previous report. Your funds deposited, again, should be coming right off your bank statement. And see right here, the total spent in prior months.
Thank you.
That's going to feed into the summary.
So that's cumulative.
Right.
Laura, you said this is online,
It's going to be on.
so we'll complete it
You can complete it online, print it out, sign it. It's an original.
so we still need to print it out.
Yeah, you can't submit it yet.
You said it'll be online tomorrow, or?
It should be online tomorrow as late as Monday. But look for it tomorrow on the website. And again, 2 signatures. Again, in the event that the neighborhood council has more than whatever the other number was on the first page, it's got a second page that allows for additional expenditures. If the neighborhood council has more than 36, you guys can move this. It should be 600. Okay, and that's it. If anybody has any other questions.
I think the actual presentation, the whole presentation, will it also be online later? Is this gonna be the new?
Yes, this will be the new funding training, it will be online.
Okay, thanks.
You will see the famous Mario. So this, it will be the full training, but there also will be a 30-minute training for the other board members.
Oh, good, okay.
So it's an updated training. Okay.
The whole project is a CIP community improvement project. Could I, then traffic and road safety and, be paid in that? Okay, if the category of the project is a CIP, community improvement project, could, and that's being undertaken by a non-profit organization. Would it be allowed to, would it be paid on the neighborhood grant or on the regular check?
You can do it as an
Then let's be approved by the department first.
Thank you.
Question. So I know the funding train, I guess the funding train doesn't expire, but is there any expectation that the treasurer, second signer has to periodically update?
Okay, the question is, do the treasurers and signers need to update their training, okay. There will be a requirement, we haven't decided if it's gonna be a year or 2 years. As you know, the funding continuously have new procedures, new policies, new everything, okay? I would suggest that every chance you get, every 3 months or 6 months, attend the training or go online. Okay, but there will be a new requirement, that I'm not sure if it's gonna be a year or 2 years. But as you all know, for the ethics, you do have to renew every 2 years. And your code of conduct must be turned in, is that April? They extended the, okay, folks, are there any other questions?